Next Tuesday is Election Day around the United States, and while many states are voting for their next elected officials, Florida voters are also deciding whether or not to legalize medical marijuana. Amendment 2 would allow doctors to prescribe cannabis to patients if they deemed it medically necessary. Just days before the election, supporters and critics of the amendment are both coming out in full force trying to rock the vote. Today, we turn to a medical marijuana advocate in Florida, Mr. Robert Platshorne. He's done a lot of work supporting Amendment 2. Robert, thanks for coming back on the program today.
Thank you for having me, Gary. It's a pleasure always.
It's always nice to talk to you about this. It's a controversial topic, not just in Florida, around the world as well, or around the United States, but it's obviously a hot time for medical marijuana in Florida. Is this discussion any different from the other 23 plus states that have already legalized it?
Yes, in Florida, the discussion is radically different. And here's why. Right now, there are several states that are looking at medical marijuana and 3 states that are looking at full legalization. The opposition hasn't raised more than $100,000 to oppose even legalization in Washington State, in Oregon, Alaska, or D.C. Yet here in Florida, they've made it the battleground state. This is where the opponents of legal medical marijuana want to stop the train. They've raised about $8 million and already spent almost $5 million on a television campaign telling people to vote no on Amendment 2.
Why are they coming out against it? What is their benefit to be against this vote?
They represent commercial forces. Big Pharma will lose billions upon billions of dollars when cannabis is available to treat cancer, arthritis, Crohn's, MS, MD. I mean, it treats so many things. Alzheimer's, it works better than any known drug for Alzheimer's, much better than Aricept. The pharmaceutical companies are fighting it tooth and nail, and they picked Florida to make a stand. On top of that, private prisons who exist primarily on marijuana arrestees.
How are they funneling this money? You said $8 million, quite a large number. How are they funneling the money into these anti-campaigns?
It's coming into a local organization. I think they call themselves Drug-Free Florida. They're just another incarnation of DARE and Drug-Free America Foundation. Mel and Betty Sembler, the people who you may recall ran an organization called Straight Incorporated. They had these rehab centers, which were really North Korean type prisons all over the country. And when it came to light that they were kidnapping and torturing children, and that they had an incredible suicide rate, Straight Incorporated was shut down. And the Semblers started DARE, which of course was in all the schools, telling children fibs about marijuana, and Drug-Free America Foundation, which gets millions and millions of dollars in government grants, and they're becoming invisible nowadays. And this is where everybody decided they were going to stand up and fight.
You've traveled the state of Florida. You've even gone to Washington, D.C. with the Silver Tour. Do you believe that this anti-campaign is going to have any traction in the outcome of the vote?
It's already had traction. When they started, we were polling about 80% in favor, people who said they were going to vote in favor of Amendment 2. That, after the campaign started, the anti-campaign, and it's fronted by the Florida sheriffs. Now, you can understand their motive. The sheriffs will lose millions and millions of dollars in DEA and ONDC grants for their number of arrests, and they'll lose even more money by not being able to do the level of confiscations. They make over $1 billion a year here in Florida from confiscating money, cars, houses, real estate, and they get to keep 85% of it for themselves. So I can understand why the sheriffs are fronting the anti-campaign, but it's brought it all the way down to where it's polling today, 61% in favor.
That's quite a drastic drop when people start injecting that kind of money into a campaign. Now, since you've been traveling the country, you've been traveling the state of Florida, you've been promoting it through the Silver Tour. What role do you think that the senior vote is going to have on Amendment 2?
The senior vote will make or break Amendment 2. I started the Silver Tour back in 2010 when Proposition 19 in California was defeated. I looked at the exit polls. It was seniors and only seniors that shot it down. That was a by-election year. This is a by-election year. Who is going to go vote? Seniors. I live in a senior community with 3,000 homes. We have our own polling place. More than 5,000 people vote just in this senior community. There are thousands of them, and they all have their own polling place. The people who were behind Amendment 2, United for Care, their theory was to bring out the youth vote. And that way they would be able to elect their candidate, the Democratic candidate running for governor, Charlie Crist, and use marijuana to get the younger vote out and pass it. But Charlie Crist only needs 50%. We need 60% to pass Amendment 2. Without the senior vote, we're not going to get it. A week ago, Amendment 2 was only polling about 55%. I've been running a saturation radio campaign in 5 radio markets here in Florida under the Silver Tour banner. And it's helped push the numbers up to where we're sitting at about 61% now. And hopefully by November 4th, we'll be back up to 65, 70% and pass Amendment 2 comfortably.
So how do you think the medical community is receiving Amendment 2 so far? Are doctors open to prescribing medical marijuana?
I've met with over 100 doctors who are anxious to prescribe medical marijuana. The Florida Medical Association has not endorsed it. They are hand in glove with the pharmaceutical companies, but the American College of Physicians, the American Nurses Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and a whole list of medical associations have endorsed it and are anxious to do it. You know, I run seminars for people who want to go into that business here, and you'd be surprised at the high number of doctors that have come to the seminar to learn about prescribing or recommending marijuana and to learn how to run a dispensary and a recommendation clinic. So there's no lack of doctors. They're standing at the starting line and want to be first.
Now, if the majority of states wind up legalizing cannabis, and it's definitely headed in that direction, do you see the federal government rescheduling marijuana at some point?
Look, the federal government has already made history. When the Holder memo came out and said they won't interfere with the states that have passed medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, and as long as the businesses are in compliance, the federal would leave them alone. That was a radical change from what we've had since 1937. Then they came out and encouraged banks to do business with the cannabis industry. And that's something that was needed desperately. It was a very cash-rich business that had no way to pay their taxes. They had to try and pay taxes with cash. pay employees with cash, and now the banks are beginning to do business with the cannabis industry thanks to this federal government. I believe, and I'm an optimist, despite having spent 30 years in prison for marijuana, I believe that before this administration leaves office, that at the very least, they'll take cannabis out of Schedule 1 and make it a Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 drug. A Schedule 1 drug is not supposed to have any medical use and have great danger of being addicting. And that just doesn't describe marijuana. There have been over 20,000 research reports written in the last 10 years at major universities and research organizations. Marijuana is being used in Israel to treat a whole host of diseases, and that program's been running for 20 years. So you can't say it has no medical value. In fact, there's a case in the California federal court right now where a judge has agreed to hear evidence that it is illegally in Schedule 1. Taking it out of Schedule 1 is going to make a big difference, and it's inevitable that it will be legalized, regulated, and taxed like everything else.
All right, shifting gears briefly now, you've got a new book out. It's called Greed and Evil. It's turning some heads. Why all the buzz?
Greed and Evil is an expose of the Semblers, DARE, Drug Free America, Kevin Sabet, the pharmaceutical industry. It has a really in-depth study of the private prison industry, who are really driving the anti-marijuana campaigns, because without it, they'd be gone. I've collected all of the great research and articles written, and have researched almost everybody who is in the anti-cannabis field, and put it all into one book called Greed and Evil. There's me big on the cover. It exposes ALEC, the American Legislative and Economic Council, who have written our drug laws for the past 20 years.
When is the book released?
The book is released probably Monday. They were actually shipped yesterday. That's the soft cover. The hard cover is at printers now and will be available when I get back from Amsterdam, where I'm going to the Cannabis Cup as a guest of High Times in late November. So they'll both be available for holiday, and I will sign every last one before I send them out.
All right, Robert, last final thought on the vote that's coming up.
I think this is the last piece, because most of the public doesn't understand why marijuana was made illegal to begin with. Not because of the drug marijuana, but because they had to stop the hemp industry. And the whole story of the Hearst Empire wanting to shut down hemp in order to keep making paper out of pulpwood trees. And when they found they could make paper out of hemp at about 25% of the cost, that's where it all started. They had to stop the production of hemp. And of course, DuPont had been using hemp oil to make the early plastics. And they felt that it would be a lot easier to make them out of petroleum products. So they had an interest in stopping it. And of course, the drug companies. So the whole story of why people can't walk into a drugstore like they could anywhere in America until 1937 and buy cannabis as a medicine is in this book, Greed and Evil. You know, it was the second most prescribed medicine in this country until it was made illegal. And the American Medical Association was absolutely incensed that they weren't even consulted
Robert, we do have to go. We're out of time. But thanks again for joining us at WHDT.
Always a pleasure, Gary. Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Robert Platshorne. You can find out more about him at blacktunadiaries.com. Up next, we got the latest news out of Hollywood, California, and today's special reports. Stay tuned. You're watching WHDT World News. We'll be right back.